Hello everyone, I'm Yoko. In this channel, I feel that a lot of the information from China is not accurately reaching countries other than China. So, I will share information I have gathered in English. I receive information from various media sources, so I would be happy to receive your comments on the content of the videos. Since English is not my native language, I use an AI speaker to create the audio to ensure that I convey the information accurately. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel and support it. Today, we're going to talk about the Middle East. Recently, Hamas attacked Israel, and in response, Israel declared a state of war and stated that they will definitely win. In reality, many people have already lost their lives, and Israel is carrying out retaliatory attacks. As many of you probably already know, this can be considered a war. Let's summarize what Hamas's attacks involved. First, they fired thousands of rockets into Israel. The exact number is a point of contention between Israel and Hamas, but they agree on the scale of the attacks. So, it's clear that a significant number of rockets were prepared in advance. Additionally, Hamas infiltrated Israel from multiple locations, killing Israeli citizens and taking a considerable number of them captive, estimated to be more than 100. What's noteworthy is that Hamas members who infiltrated Israel from various locations seem to have coordinated information sharing. They didn't just breach fences but also used boats and paragliders for infiltration. This implies that these boats and paragliders were also prepared in advance. Israel has an intelligence agency called Mossad, and one would expect them to have detected these preparations and thwarted any Israeli attack. However, Israel does have its limitations in counterintelligence, and the fact that such extensive preparations were possible suggests that some nation or organization was strongly backing Hamas. Regarding the question of who is backing Hamas, Iran has been mentioned as the primary supporter. While other countries are also believed to provide support, Iran is considered the most powerful backer. That's why Israel is concerned about Iran. To summarize, Israel and Iran have a long-standing enmity, and in this particular situation, Hamas, supported by Iran, attacked Israel, leading to Israeli counterattacks. The key question here is why Hamas attacked Israel at this particular time, and it's believed to be related to the actions of another country, Saudi Arabia. In recent times, Saudi Arabia's relations with the United States have been deteriorating, and it seems like they are distancing themselves from the US. Some people think this way, based on the impression of Saudi Arabia's situation in Japan. However, countries in that region generally do not completely sever ties with any other nation or organization, and they maintain relationships with multiple parties, even those that might be unfavorable to the US. It seems to be a basic strategy for survival in the region. Despite the appearance of deteriorating relations with the US, Saudi Arabia has strong ties with the US, especially at the level of the Saudi royal family and the government. However, it's not exclusive to the US, they also have relationships with other powers and may strengthen or maintain ties with forces that the US finds inconvenient. So, the situation is not as straightforward as it may appear on the surface. Now, let's look at how Iran perceives all this. Iran sees Israel as an enemy, as mentioned earlier. What about Saudi Arabia? This is where it gets complicated. Saudi Arabia and Iran have a long history of antagonism. While both are Islamic countries, they have different branches of Islam, Shia in Iran and Sunni in Saudi Arabia, and different ethnic backgrounds. These two countries have effectively been in a state of proxy warfare, and one example is Yemen. Yemen is not widely covered in Japan, but it's a place where the government is backed by Saudi Arabia, but there are strong anti-government forces, supported by Iran. This has led to a proxy war in Yemen. Therefore, Saudi Arabia appears to be distancing itself from the United States, but within the Saudi royal family and government, there still exists a strong connection with the US. However, this doesn't mean they are exclusively aligned with the US. They maintain relationships with other major powers and do not completely sever ties with anyone. This is likely a fundamental survival strategy in the region. So, despite potential tensions with the US, Saudi Arabia continues to maintain strong ties with the US, and in the region, they even maintain connections with those that the US finds inconvenient. Another factor to consider when looking at countries in this region is the normalization of diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This gained significant attention as China mediated in improving relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. In other words, China's influence has been growing, orchestrating the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia, two countries that have been engaged in proxy wars, such as in Yemen. This development has created a dangerous situation for Israel. While maintaining a close relationship with the United States, Saudi Arabia has been moving closer to Iran and China. This shift in Saudi Arabia's foreign policy is not viewed favorably by Israel. Israel sees this as a potential threat, as Saudi Arabia, despite its government's alignment with the United States, faces potential challenges both internally and externally. Saudi Arabia, despite publicly maintaining an oppositional stance against Israel and the United States, has been steadily getting closer to these nations for political and economic reasons. This balancing act, aimed at improving relations with the West, also comes with domestic challenges, particularly in dealing with more conservative elements critical of these actions. The potential normalization of diplomatic relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia is a cause for concern for Iran. For Iran, it would mean that a country heavily involved in proxy wars, such as Saudi Arabia, is getting closer to its archenemy, Israel. This shift in regional dynamics poses a severe threat to Iran's interests in the region. Therefore, Iran has a strong interest in supporting organizations like Hamas, which challenge Israel. China's support for Iran has helped it withstand economic pressures from the United States. Iran has expanded its influence in strategic countries like Syria, which is crucial for Israel. Iran's growing influence in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, combined with ongoing conflicts in Yemen, complicates Israel's security situation. Despite Israel's targeted strikes in Syria and Iraq to eliminate Iranian-backed military bases, Iran remains determined to challenge Israel's dominance in the region. The fact that China supports Iran in this endeavor also means that the sanctions imposed on Iran by the United States may not have the intended impact. Saudi Arabia and Iran, on the verge of normalization, create a complex situation for Israel. The changing dynamics in the Middle East, coupled with China's support, have further complicated Israel's security situation. Israel is not merely dealing with regional issues, it is navigating the influence of major international players. The recent conflict with Hamas is not solely an issue between Israel and Hamas, it is intertwined with the geopolitical interests of regional and global powers. This situation becomes incredibly intricate because each country has its own strategies, and their true intentions are often unclear. They tend to change their attitudes as needed, making it challenging for Japanese observers to understand. One of the characteristics of countries in this region is that they avoid leaning too heavily towards any one country. Doing so can be risky. Even if they maintain a good relationship with the United States, they may still maintain ties with China or Iran as leverage to extract support from the United States. Unlike the Japanese approach, which tends to avoid engaging with countries that might be seen as adversaries, these nations engage with multiple countries simultaneously. This approach is difficult for Japanese people to fully grasp because they prefer straightforward and honest relations. For Japan, it's about taking care of its close allies and not engaging with countries seen as adversaries. However, in reality, many countries operate this way. Saudi Arabia, for example, has recently improved its relations with China and Iran. From an external perspective, this might appear as if Saudi Arabia is distancing itself from the United States, but at the same time, Saudi Arabia has been progressing towards the normalization of diplomatic relations with Israel. This balance in their foreign policy can be confusing to observe. This approach has led to shifts in regional dynamics, and it might seem like Saudi Arabia has moved away from the United States. Still, at the same time, they've been advancing their diplomatic relations with Israel. This complexity has allowed groups like Iran and Hamas to make strategic moves to hinder Saudi-Israeli relations. In the grander scheme of things, and especially in terms of regional stability, these nations often support armed groups at the periphery. From the perspective of the United States and Israel, addressing these groups without considering the backing forces, such as Iran and China, is unlikely to lead to a final resolution. It's possible that this problem might escalate to the point of a third world war if it's not tackled thoroughly. While it's unlikely that the United States and China would become direct participants in a war in the near term, various factors make this scenario worth considering. If Israel only combats peripheral armed groups without addressing the backing forces like Iran and China, its position will continue to deteriorate. In such a scenario, reducing China's influence might become a necessary goal. The specific means to achieve this goal remain uncertain, but given China's involvement in the dynamics of the Middle East, it's possible that the rivalry between the United States and China could become sharper in the future. That concludes our discussion for today. Until next time.